Hello and welcome to TalkPad, where we talk positively about dyslexia. And if you follow this podcast regularly, you will be fascinated to realize that I've been promoted. Normally, Jamie does this intro, but no, it is World Dyslexia Awareness Day, and I have got the chair. So if any of you are thinking of getting a word in edgeways, think again, because when I've got an audience, yeah, everybody knows, different story. No, seriously, we've had a bit of a change around. So Jamie and Charlotte are still here. Welcome, Jamie and Charlotte, and our amazing guest, Shawn Meredith. Welcome, Shawn.
Thank you. Good to be here.
But before any of you speak too much, I have to do the legendary introduction to our guest, which I have prepared and stuck on my computer so I can look into the camera and read it at the same time. So here we go. Today is World Dyslexia Awareness Day, as you know, and we have gone literally around the world to get our amazing guest. We have gone to Pittsburgh, PA, as we say in this country, in the USA, to bring you Shawn Meredith. Shawn is a hugely experienced executive coach and has worked locally, to him, and internationally for sales teams, startup entrepreneurs, young emerging leaders, non-profit managers, and corporate team leaders. Shawn has university degrees in psychology and philosophy, as well as lots of postgraduate training qualifications. He is certified by the International Coaching Federation, and although still a youngster, has been coaching since 2004. Not only that, but Shawn has provided executive coaching for Facebook, Instagram, Deloitte, LinkedIn, American Express, Visa, Capital One, Mars Inc., and many more well-known corporations. And not only that, Shawn is one of the few Americans who likes to play rugby. And not only that, Shawn is dyslexic. So please welcome Shawn Meredith.
Yeah.
Hooray!
I absolutely love those intros. It is so special. Nothing else like it.
And we have a rugby player from Pennsylvania. I mean, how fantastic is that? Welcome to the show, Shawn.
Thank you. I got to start bringing you to my sales pitches, guy. That sounded great.
It would be a pleasure. Well, I mentioned the rugby because we are in South Wales. Well, I am, and Jamie and Charlotte, which is big rugby country. And so, you know, that reference could buy a few views.
A few people are going to stay on because you said that.
Yeah.
Can I just point out that I actually used to play rugby for Wales? Which you didn't know about, guys. So, yes.
No.
I used to play rugby, wheelchair rugby for Wales, and I was captain the Six Nations. So, so I do. It's the running bit that I don't do.
So has this just become a rugby podcast? Is that what happened here?
Not at all.
It's something that me and Shawn have in common, as well as being dyslexic. So
maybe that's from the rugby. I don't know if that was.
Well, if you see me play, mate, you would have to test with it. But you know, hey, mate, we're just practically brothers now, mate.
Yeah, we go. They're perfect. Yeah, I played in the second row. You can't tell the cam about 6'4", 280 pounds. So I just laid on the bottom of piles. Oh, that was my job.
Yeah, I pretty much created those piles.
Oh, good. Thank you. We appreciate it. Because then we don't have to run. That's where we like to be. Yeah.
Absolutely. So have we got some fantastic questions, Guy?
We have. And I'm going to jump in here because what we hear from a lot of our guests is about teamwork and in the context of dyslexia, which knits in neatly with the rugby thing. Because dyslexia has a variety of characteristics which can be a greater or lesser nuisance depending on what you're up to. So often what we hear is that people find others with strengths. I think Jamie and Charlotte can relate to this. Is this your experience, Shawn, or do you go it alone?
That's a good question. Oh, geez, I'd like to say a lot about that guy. What a great question. You're good at this. You know, I think it's a combo of both. I mean, teaming, I think sometimes, is a dyslexic individual or an individual with dyslexia that, thinking back to when I was on teams initially, I think there's an entry challenge. There's the ways that you're worried about, how am I going to present? How am I going to be seen? Of course, always that fear of, if I spell things wrong or write things wrong, what's the team going to think about me? That identity. But I do think there's a lot of merit to, some of the other sides, the patterns recognizing and the socializing. And I don't know about other folks, but, dyslexia has forced me to learn how to nimbly manage relationships.
Nicely put.
So diplomacy, negotiation, all that stuff tends to rank higher because you spend a lifetime managing this in relationships, and kind of how to manage it in relationships. So I think there's a lot of transferable aspects with that in teams, for sure.
I've got a question to bring you onto this, right? So a lot of rugby is played backwards, right? So
Yeah.
you come up from behind people, take the ball, etc., etc. Now, I can't do left and right. It just doesn't happen. That's one of my issues. So I want to ask you, I know how I used to get around it, but how do you get around? I don't know, you may not have that issue, but the two main things I have an issue with is names. I can never remember them. And I certainly can't remember left and right. So I used to have to write it on my hand so that when I was coming up, I go, all right, I'm at the left. What about you? Did you find the same thing?
It's funny because I was in the second row, so we were, my job was I stuck my head between the prop and the hooker, and I think I was on the left, but I knew whose head I went. I knew whose butt my head went near. I didn't know which side. And that's such a great observation because we weren't, we were more the muscle of the team, so we didn't have to run a lot of the real dynamic plays. I didn't have to be off thinking about that as much. But yeah, I would not say, I go on the left or I go on the right. I think I adapted to that in creative ways so much I didn't even think about left or right. It was more, I know I'm behind that number. And yeah, I struggle with the names too, in the plays, and what people would want to yell this stuff out. Where are we going? So I guess I adapted some degree just by knowing who I need to be by. I'm behind that number. Let me just sit behind that number. Because for me, it's never affected numbers. I don't know why. Math has always been even advanced. So I don't get any number jumble. I don't have any trouble with the math. But the letters, any kind of stuff in the letter department's always been tricky for me.
So in your early days, Shawn, I'm going to bring it back now. From away from rugby, in your early days, what were the challenges that you found, and how did you sort of adapt to those?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was in school in the 80s, and one of the things I was talking to a guy about, which is interesting, is I don't think in the U.S. Dyslexia is as established. That there, at the time when I was first kind of diagnosed, I guess, I don't even think that was really a word. It was just this vague word, people who read backwards type stuff. And I was in second grade, vividly remember this. I was in second grade, and they started splitting the class into advanced and remedial reading. It was just for reading, so all the other classes would be united. And for some reason, the school system decided they had to split out the reading. And the teacher would go between them. And the remedial kids, you got sent to the back of the room, and the advanced kids got the nice front of the room. They'd sit around the teacher's desk, and, already that division is starting. And they started me in the advanced because my comprehension was advanced. And a lot of, I don't know about other folks, but for me, I've really heightened that context clue stuff. Because when reading sentences or things, I'm really good at the context clues. So my comprehension tended to be advanced. And then they'd watch me read out loud and they'd think this kid doesn't even know his letters yet. So they kept sending me back and forth between the remedial and the advanced. And I remember being so young, I didn't know what that meant. I was just like, whatever, the teacher's telling me to do a thing. And that, that was kind of the first of many stories where it started coming about that people didn't know what to do with me.
It's crazy when, so this is the 80s. I was born in the 80s, and so I went through school, in the 90s, and it was still, and you think about it, right? Like, I don't know what it's like in the US now, but over here, dyslexia has only really started getting established in recent years, in literally the last 10, 15 years. I don't know if you can elaborate a bit more on that, Guy.
It is, it's a bit more, it goes back a bit further than that. But I started, when I came to Wales at the end of the 80s, and I was working in education in the 90s. Some local authorities did not recognize dyslexia as a thing, and some did. So depending where you went to school, you may or may not get access to that one teacher in the whole of the local authority.
Yeah.
So it is a lot better now, in as much as dyslexia is a recognized thing. And the internet, I guess, has a lot to do with that, because you can't hold back, can you, when there's that wall of information that's saying there's all these characteristics, there's all these issues. So there's lots of strategies out there. The frustration is that someone like Shawn in a school now, a diagnosis of dyslexia would not be of much help to you, because you probably work hard enough, have enough strategies, and would have a kind of support at home, so that your standard of attainment in the reading tests would not be low enough to qualify for the financial support from the government. So, and that's a frustration for a lot of parents who, take a big interest in their children's education. They're doing everything they can at home. They see their child is struggling, not meeting their potential, hugely frustrated, but they're just keeping their head above the water kind of thing in school, so they don't get that extra support that goes to people who are deemed, rightly or wrongly, more needy. So it's complicated business, and a lot of it's down to money, but it is recognized. And because we have World Dyslexia Day in Britain and Europe, it's Dyslexia Week and ADHD Month. So there is a bit more hope, but you have to be proactive, don't you, as a parent and an adult, and you've got to put yourself out there. That's the big challenge, isn't it? Because if you've had a hard time as a kid, have you got the confidence to say to people, oh, here's all my vulnerabilities, help me? Because not everyone's happy to do that. So I've got another question for you now, Shawn.
Yep.
Having read my amazing intro, I thought, look at all this. This is all quality stuff, executive coaching, leadership stuff. I've watched your tips on YouTube and everything, which were very good. And I like, because they are short and to the point. And we get this with a lot of our guests. It doesn't look like you have a disability, dyslexia, holding you back. So, but obviously it has an impact. So what's the cost of juggling all this stuff in order to be as successful as plainly you are doing what you do?
For me, and just I tend to be pretty rough draft when I'm speaking, and I'm willing to be pretty vulnerable with this. So this is just my rough draft answer. One of the things I really struggle with is my own personal images of success. All of that stuff, I really struggle to see myself as successful. And I think that, I've had a lifetime of sitting outside the doorway of success but never getting the A's or the degrees or this thing or that thing. I genuinely think if I was not dyslexic, that I most likely would have been in a different career path. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I was initially trying to go into pre-med work. I really wanted to be a doctor. I would still be interested in that. And I can remember molecular biology. I failed the thing twice in undergrad. because you had to memorize all the Latin name phylums, and that was the test. That was just it. You had to sit down and categorize all these Latin words and Greek words, and I don't think I ever could have gotten past it, or the effort. I mean, really, the effort for someone with my brain to get past that is just stupid. And then there's, the frustration of, is this going to affect my skills? If I were a doctor, would it matter? I don't know what fungus is categorized as, and that frustration.
Yeah.
So I think that you get so many of these. I never really pursued a PhD. I would love to. In my career, if you just have that doctor donation, you're already going to go through certain doors. But just the effort to get that PhD in a traditional sense, it's a big lift. And I think that daily I struggle with it. I mean, full disclosure, one of the ways Guy and I met was I was looking for a dyslexic coach because it's even getting in the way of my practice. That in my practice, my coaching practice, as I'm creating materials, and in this day and age, we have to put it out there in the internet. We have to write things and do things. And when I typed in dyslexia coaching into Google, there was tons of work in the UK and very little in the US. It's how I found out about you guys in the group. So it's certainly still there. I mean, my business partner, it's funny because times I'll say, I can't write this certain copy, and we'll meet and I'll talk the whole thing out. And she'd be like, that sounds great. Just write it down. I'm like, you don't understand. This is going to be 8 hours for me to hammer out this one page. And then I'm going to spiral not only in the challenges of dyslexia, but then my own kind of self-judgment and doubt. And I'm going to be sitting here till 4 a.m. at the computer pecking out whatever I'm doing. So there's it's just such a daily challenge. It's so hard to not get in your head. And maybe one last piece on that, Guy, and I don't want to spend too much time on it unless it's interesting to the group, but we live in such a text-based world that there's just daily, I don't know, what's the opposite of affirmation? There's daily confirmation that I'm not included. It's just daily, and it's inside and it's internal. Even my wife and I, yesterday, I'm driving to baseball practice and she says, "You turn right here, honey." And I said, "I know." She goes, "Well, I don't know what to do with you because every other day you don't know." And some days I do know. And that's fine. And the woman loves me and she supports me. But even then, it's just this, I just constantly have to be like, oh yeah, okay. It's just affirming that I'm struggling with this disability daily.
It sounds like your wife is similar to my wife. And it's funny when you talk about writing, I'm a really creative writer when people can understand it. So what happens is I write everything and then Charlotte translates it back into English.
And I can be quite cruel.
Yeah, I do that with my wife. I'll sit down. My wife, I'll say, "I need to talk at you, honey," and she'll sit with the computer and when I'm doing important writing, I'll dictate, and she'll sit there and write it for me, like if it's a big proposal or something important. And yeah, it does. I have sympathy for you, Charlotte, and her, because I think, she's like, doesn't make any sense. Why? I can't follow the pattern. And I'm like, good luck being me, because I can't follow the pattern. It's not like I want this, but it is, daily. It just gets in the way. Anyway.
What sort of have you had any tools that have been helpful that you can share with the audience, or tips on how to outsource things that can be helpful?
I do have some, probably more than I realize. I think that
well, a sat nav is definitely one of them.
we call those GPSs here always. I do it to the grocery store, sticking the phone on there to the grocery store. Even though my kids say, "Dad, you know where you're going?" I'm like, maybe. I think, because I could never even remember street names. And I didn't think it was odd when I was young. But my friends would be like, well, you go down to this street and this street. And I'd be like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Gosh. My dad used to do that to me, mate, right? I'd be like, "Dad, how do I get so-and-so?" And you go, "Oh, yeah, you go down the A470, then you come off then at junction 15 onto the A41, and then you go down on the west." And I'm like, "Right, Dad, you lost me." You should go down.
Well, and Charlotte, I want to answer your question, but Google, I use Google Maps, and they changed this thing recently. So what happens is when you come near a turn, the map will zoom in.
Yeah.
I can't handle that. I think they changed it last year. All of a sudden I've missed so many turns because of that. And I don't know what it is. And it's funny, I was complaining to my wife. I'm like, I hate this feature. I hate this. She's like, I like it. It's helped me. And there are so many turns I blow through just because it'll be like when you're 100 feet from a turn, it zooms in the map and it throws off, I guess, just my spatial whatever. Yeah. And I always think the turn's later. But I think that's one. I think in my business, what I found, even when I send emails, so there's a great extension on, you can get it on any web browser. It's called Read Aloud. It's free. And when I send an email, you can highlight any text on your computer and you can click that button and it'll read it to you because I can hear the errors, but I will not see them. So usually when I type emails, I'll especially professional emails, I'll click that and the computer will read it to me, and then I can hear it. I use almost exclusively audiobooks. There's great apps, free ones here in the US where there's like Amazon's Audible, but they connect to the library system. So people don't know this, but you can get library books for free. There's multiple apps. One's called Libby, other things. And so I can get audiobooks so I can kind of read and keep especially in my field, you have to do a lot of reading of all the research and stuff. And then voice to text has been phenomenal for me. So sometimes, things that can recognize a voice to text. I mean, that's been a real game changer. I mean, we live at a great age, I think, and we have the experience of growing up before all this technology. One point, this is kind of off topic, but it's a real point for me. This came up when Guy and I were talking that most of the accommodations in the U.S. are just extra time, and that gets me so frustrated because it's not an accommodation for the disability because the challenge is the text. More time just means you're going to make me angry. Hey, you get more time in the torture chamber. Oh, thanks. That's exactly what I wanted. There were some very few teachers or situations that would let me do like oral exams. So people would read to me, and I'm telling you, I would go from low C's to high A's if that would happen. And it's just, I think that hopefully one day the accommodations meet the disability, and I'm sure you see this, Jamie, where it's like, I was telling Guy this, it's like telling a wheelchair user, you can take longer to get up the stairs.
Yeah. As a habit, you couldn't have used a better analogy because I am a wheelchair user.
yeah. And it's like, great. Yeah. Oh, you can have 45 minutes to get up the stairs. It's like that. No, you're totally misunderstanding the disability. Anyway, I kind of went on a rant there.
I'll tell you another app that is really good. Is an app called Grammarly. It does all the grammar for you. And I'll be honest with you, right? If I had one of those, if I used that proofreader, I don't generally, I just get Charlotte to do it. But if I had one of those proofreaders built in, right, honestly, by the time she's finished, she'd be out of breath because there's very few commas. And that's what I use Grammarly for. So I just type.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we do it, like, we'll do like the write-up to do it for an award presentation or something else. And Charlotte comes up, she goes, oh, God. She's getting like really narky with it. And it is quite funny, but not at the time. But yeah, it is quite funny when you look back. But yeah,
well, it's interesting, and I'm curious, Charlotte, because I do think I'm starting to see this, but I think it's important that we spend some time, and maybe here in Dyslexia Day, just talking about the loved ones of dyslexics. I don't know their name. There's a couple on YouTube where the fella is not dyslexic and his girlfriend is, and they make these hilarious videos of like, here's what it's like. And when I watch them, I show my wife. I'm like, sorry, honey, I know you deal with this daily. But...
That would be a whole new show.
So come on then, Guy. What's your next question, buddy? I know you're burning. I can feel the burning to call out the next question.
Well, I was leaning forwards because the dog started barking in the background, and I thought, I'll cover the mic. I want to. But
it didn't work, by the way. But you know, the joys of modern age, right? The dog, isn't it?
Is that actually Guy's like cue to the next question button? Does he have a little fake dog bark?
Who let the dogs out?
That is a great. You see, that I would never have thought of that as a neurotypical in the room. It would never have occurred to me. But that is a genius idea, Shawn. But no, what strikes me is that there are, you know, we hear a lot in this country in terms of reasonable adjustments about, as you say, extra time, voice to text and text to voice software, and coaching, and they are dished out regularly, supported by government funding, as if almost it's a kind of solution. And it's so important to remember that it doesn't compensate for the massive frustrations and complications that dyslexia can bring, but it helps a bit because it saves some time once you've spent a lot of time getting used to learning how to dictate. Because if you've been brought up writing with a pen, to suddenly sit in front of a computer and have to dictate a proposal or report or something is a bit complicated, because it takes some thought, doesn't it? So it's a different way of working. And similarly, listening to stuff takes a bit of practice in order to build those skills and just to operate, you know, and to concentrate and maintain that focus. So there are tools, aren't there? But they take time and effort to learn themselves. So it's a good point. And so my next question is, how do you disclose to people, or do you not, maybe, the dyslexia thing, or do you not call it dyslexia? Because it's so different in different people, isn't it? And if you say, oh, dyslexia, then it's like Jamie. Jamie says, I'm a wheelchair user, but I was just watching you walking up the mountain on YouTube. So there needs to be subtlety and nuance.
Yeah, I have to remind myself constantly that there's this thing called dyslexia and this approximation of whatever it is, because of the nuance. You know, and I know this is out there in the literature, but dyslexia, it's one of those internal disorders, and just, I don't know if it's, I'm sure it's a combination, but I always feel that there's just that judgment of like, yeah, sure, you have some trouble reading, or, you know, everybody's response is always, oh yeah, I spell things wrong sometimes too. And you know, it's just so invalidating, and it's so, it just makes me not want to talk about it. It makes me not want to talk to anyone about it. You know, Guy and I were talking, and he said, you know, well, some folks I work with put a disclaimer on their email, and I simultaneously loved that suggestion, and I'm afraid to do it on some level, you know, because there is that, what does this mean? And I told my wife about it, and she goes, well, people always write that thing like, I typed this from my phone, forgive the errors, and somehow that's more okay. Like, that's more okay. You know, and I think that I don't know, you know, I've been out of the school system for a while. I have a lot of hope that, and I used to work in mental health work. So I have a lot of hope that as these things get normalized, it's just going to be like a factor. You know, it's almost going to be like how we talk about personality. There's just different types, and they're all kind of different, but equal. You know, I think, especially me in a business world where you're trying to make certain sales, and there is a competitiveness to that, and there's expectations, and my career depends on it, my livelihood for my family. You just got to be considerate of how that's going to land with some folks. You know, for some folks it may work, but I'm not a dyslexia coach. You know, I'm in kind of corporate spaces that are much more ruthless often, and they, you know, they try to pretend they're not, but they are. And
we're an equal opportunity company. No, you're not.
Yeah, no. Absolutely. Did you ask me for a written text resume? No, you're not. You know, So anyway, I don't know, guy. It's a great question. It's something I'm wrestling with at this stage because what happens to me, I've done tons of education and certifications, and I probably have, I don't know, 10, 15 different certifications, like these kind of 1 year to 3 month courses you do. Every single time I do one, I go into them and I do really well, and I socialize well, and I perform well, and I get kind of seen as a top student. And then quickly my performance starts tanking. So around the midway point, I'll be behind on all the homework. I'll be kind of hiding in my shame. I'll be hoping they don't do it. I'll be promising myself I'll do it later. And then it clicks and I go, oh yeah, I'm dyslexic. Oh, I didn't plan for that. I forgot about that. And I'll disclose to the teacher privately. And I got to say, the most recent experience, it was terrible because there was this student who I liked. She was a great, she was a wonderful woman. And I disclosed this, and the teacher said, would you mind talking to the room about it? Because I think it's relevant. And I said, sure, I'll talk to the room about it. And then I get this email chain, 13 emails, and it's from the program director, and she CCs me on it and says, I don't know, let's talk to Shawn about that. And they've been having this whole dialogue where the student, unbeknownst to me, was advocating that she could read my final exam to me. And I didn't ask for that and anything. And I was like, immediately, I just shut it down. I'm fine. I don't know why you two are talking about this. This is weird. And then I'm sitting in class, and the teacher's literally writing on the board, and this woman leans over to me, and loud enough everyone can hear it, goes, Shawn, do you need me to read that to you? And I'm just like, God, like, well, this is why I don't even say anything. It's such a mess. So anyway, it's kind of unresolved for me. That's, I think, why even the speech here is unresolved. But it's such an important factor. What do you do with it? How do you talk about it? Hi, I'm Shawn the dyslexic. No, wait. Hi, I'm Shawn. I have dyslexia. Oh, no, I have a different, wonderful, superhuman brain. That doesn't capture it. Like, what do you say?
I don't know, mate. You figure it out, because if there's one thing you are, mate, is a natural born problem solver. That is what.
No doubt about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what, right? I have known people, and this is genuine, right? I've known people which I would put on the genius spectrum, right? Like super intelligent. You ask them a maths question and they're like, bang, there's the answer. You ask them to spell any word in like 15 languages or something, and they'll be able to tell you the answer. Then you put them in a room and go, right, you need to get from there to there without doing that. And they're like, and you know what, right? Because that's their level, that is their disability. Their disability is that they cannot problem solve. Mm-hmm. Like, it's that old analogy, they're super intelligent with no common sense. I think a lack of common sense is probably a bigger disability than not being able to read and write properly.
It's so funny. Quick anecdote here, and I'll keep it quick, I promise. But Jamie, I do a lot of backpacking. So I do like 8 days in the woods, 15, 20-mile days with a friend from high school. And the guy is a logistical genius. He plans all these trips. I could never do that. He plans it all. He gets us where we need to go. He arranges everything. And we were in Mount Olympus Olympic Park in Washington State. And we got to a point where he lost cell phone signal. And he's got these apps mapping our route, planning everything for the day, checks them every 20 minutes. And he goes, I got to admit, I never understand you. Like, I need to know where I am and what I'm doing. And you just never have in our life. And I'm like, well, I mean, welcome to my daily existence. And we lost cell phone signal. So all of his apps went down and he couldn't track anything. And he was just getting, it was funny because he's smart. He could talk about it. He's like, I'm getting so irritable and frustrated. And you're just like, I'm like, the trail's going to end eventually. And if we pop out in the wrong place, that's the story of my life. So I'll just talk to a stranger and get us a ride. And that's.
Oh, I love that.
That's a bit like us, actually. But I got to admit, I'm the guy that I like to know where I'm going. I don't actually like being lost. But we have gone on walks, haven't we? And we've just gone like, where are we? Where are we going? But yeah, no, that's very, very true. And actually, I think sometimes, this is why we talk positively about dyslexia, because there's a lot of negative stuff about it, right? There's negatives about anything. There's negatives about being a man. There's negatives about being a woman. There's negatives about being black. There's negatives about being white. But there's a lot of positives about it as well. And there's negatives about being in a wheelchair. There's negatives about only having one arm. But there's also a massive amount of positives about it as well. And that's, I think, what people, because we talk about characteristics, which I'll bring it up. I think sometimes people forget that actually it's just our characteristic. It's just what makes us me, makes you you. And you know, you're an executive coach within the corporate and, you know, executive kind of space, which I know super intelligent people that cannot get into those spaces. So the fact that, you know, you've done it will certainly not, I will certainly wouldn't say that you're sitting on the door of success. But it's really funny because I heard this story recently, and I've repeated it a few times now, where someone was talking about their son, and she was going, "Oh yes, my son. They're very successful. He's a banker, you know, in London. He's very successful. He's a very successful banker in London." And the lady said, "Oh, brilliant. What did he want to do?" And she was like, "Oh, he had some dream of being a truck driver, but he's a banker now in London." And she actually turned around and she went, "Well, he's not that successful because he hasn't achieved what he always wanted to achieve." And that sits with me really, really well. And I've had so many jobs, right? I've done so many different careers. And this, since I've been in business on my own, doing what we're doing, is the first time in my life I can actually just be Jamie. And that, do you know what, is what makes me successful. It doesn't matter what I did or didn't do. It's the fact that now I wake up every day and I'm just who I am. And that absolutely makes me successful, mate. And it's exactly the same for you in my eyes, Shawn.
That's a great perspective. I love that. And appreciate that. You know, there's a natural coming into our own that happens in age. I just read a study that people are most comfortable with their body image past the age of 60. I was like,
yeah, I can affirm that.
That makes sense. But you know, it does complicate it when society has us labeled. There's an extra layer we got to deal with. So it's great perspective there, Jamie. I love that.
Yeah,
I think I've got to say, because we've got to wrap this up in a minute, because I dare say Shawn has got a day of work ahead of him because he's stepped forward into the future to speak to us because he's just had his breakfast. But what I wanted to say is that that thing about, you know, when your friends' apps all went down and you just had to get on with it, that shows what I said earlier, isn't it? The benefit of teams and the advantage of people having different strengths. No one wants to be defined by a single characteristics, whether it's being dyslexic or brilliant at solving, I don't know, those complicated equations that people had. You know, we're all made up of lots of different things, aren't we? So that's quite important. And the other thing is, which you said right at the start, Shawn, which I think is important, is that it's only the last 500 years that the world has had print. Before that, for the tens of thousands of years, dyslexia didn't exist as an individual character. It was probably, you know, we were all getting on well enough together, weren't we, benefiting from each other's strengths. So it's a kind of contextual disability, isn't it? Because of this deluge of print, everything has to be written out. And, you know, we were told, let me tell you this, because you're too young to know this. Back in the 80s, we were told with computers, paperless offices, there wouldn't be any paper, all on screen. Well, we know what happened to that. It's just, you know, an endless stream, isn't it, of words and more words and more words. So
about right. So actually, there's no such thing as dyslexia. What we are just traditionalists. Because
no wonder I like backpacking so much.
That's it. Genius.
Right? Everybody was dyslexic. So actually, what we are is just naturally born traditionalists.
Love it. Love it. And that is the note on which we should tie it up today. So I have to thank you, Shawn Meredith, for being an amazing guest. Thank you to my co-hosts, Jamie and Charlott McAnsh. And let's hope that people watch this and enjoy it as much as we have in the taking part of it. So thanks, everybody, and goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye.